Welcome to Real Estate Investing Abundance, the show for busy, fulfilled professionals like you to learn how to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. Now, here is your host, Dr. Alan Lomax.
Enlightened investors, welcome to Real Estate Investing Abundance. I'm your host, Dr. Alan. I am excited to have with me today a thought leader who is working on the cutting edge of the housing industry. His company leads the way in bringing to the market environmentally friendly and efficient housing alternatives that meet the needs of the 21st century homeowner. Are you perhaps a busy professional passionate about the work of your calling, but have come to realize that the hope of developing financial independence has taken a backseat to the priorities of following your passion? If you can identify with this, I have good news. Steed Tucker Capital is an investment company designed just for you, the passionate, fulfilled professional, so that we can help you develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. So go to our website, steedtucker.com, and enroll in the Enlightened Investor Circle. There you'll receive education and support for your passive real estate investing goals, no matter your level of investment expertise and experience. Our guest, Jesse Russell, brings 20 plus years of experience in executive level leadership, project management, construction, and land development. He is a philosophical leader in the shifting movement in how people view housing and, more importantly, how they live their lives. The popularity and demand for the avant-garde homes that his company brings to the market is reflected in the 20% returns they routinely bring to their private equity investors. Jesse, before we get into the business of real estate investing, tell us about your former life as an executive producer of reality TV shows.
Yeah, so I grew up in Bend, and when I went to school, I went to the University of Oregon to the journalism school, and I had an emphasis on documentary film. So I was really interested in documentary film. I ended up in New York to go to graduate school, and while I was there, I did 2 semesters of graduate school. It was so expensive. I just told myself, look, I think it's time to try to get a job. And weirdly, the first job that I got was as an associate producer on a reality show the producers of Maury Povich were doing. And I had never heard of reality television. It wasn't even a genre at that point, really. And it seemed like documentary to me. You know, we traveled around and we did interviews and then cut those together for stories. So but that started a 15-year career in doing reality television. I ended up in Los Angeles for about 10 years, kind of had worked my way up to the executive producer status and was running shows, but was really not very fulfilled. You know, I really missed Bend. I would come back here a lot and wanted to figure out a way that I could move back to my hometown, but there was just not a lot of production work. And so one of my parts of my job was to go to the networks and pitch them show ideas and then hear from them what types of shows they're looking for. And there was a network called FYI that was going to launch their network with a show called Tiny House Nation. I had never heard of tiny houses ever before, and I went back to my office. I looked them up and I saw all these really cool, interesting, small designs that people were building houses on these trailers. And I thought, man, Ben would really go for this thing. So I quit my job. I sold everything that I owned mostly and moved back to Bend. I called one of my childhood friends who's a handyman builder type person. We'd been friends since we were little kids. And I said, hey, I want to start this tiny house company. What do you think? And he said, no problem. You can live in the garage and come live with my family and we'll build that first house. And so that's what I did. I moved back to Bend and we built our very first house was called the Hiatus, and it was a 8 by 20 foot trailer with a house on it.
Well, interesting transition there. You just sold everything and just all of a sudden quit a very different industry and just jumped into tiny houses just because you had seen one documentary or one thing about tiny houses. And you said that's going to work fantastically well in Bend, Oregon. What made you think that tiny houses were going to be so popular in Bend, Oregon?
Well, I think the main thing is and was the housing crisis that Bend and now the rest of the nation is kind of going through. One of the great things about Bend, it's an outdoor area. There's great ski mountain here. There's a lot of fly fishing, camping, mountain biking, that sort of thing. And I think the people that are native to here and people who move here all have this kind of adventurous spirit. And a lot of those people that make Bend interesting are people that work at the mountain or they work at the bar, or they don't necessarily make a lot of money. And what I was seeing is that they couldn't afford houses anymore. And when you look at a person's, financial wealth and what's happened to them in their lives, definitely buying your first house and how early you're able to do that and start to accrue equity is a really important thing for someone's retirement and someone's generation of wealth, especially if you're trying to get to a point where you have some passive income. That's a great way to go. And people are just being priced out of the market here. So I saw these tiny houses and I said, look, these things, people are building these for somewhere between 80 and 100 grand. And all of a sudden someone owns a house. And, the spirit of Bend, I felt like would really support that type of movement too, the kind of DIY movement part of it, and the reducing of possessions and also the carbon footprint. There's just so many things that come out of choosing to live in these small spaces. And I thought I'd be really supported by the city when I moved back.
So you moved into your friend's garage. How long ago was this?
Probably about 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years. Yeah.
Okay. So your family was with you?
I didn't have a family at that point.
Okay.
Laura, who we now have a 4-year-old together, and Ella, who's 14. So I do have a family now, but at that point I was footloose and fancy free. I had met Laura again. We went to high school together, actually. And I had met her again while I was in LA, getting ready to come back to Bend because her brother lives in Manhattan Beach. And so that was another great reason for moving back to Bend. Right when I got back, I called Laura up and we went on a date, and that was the beginning of what is now a pretty happy little family.
Well, interesting. Well, even though you were footloose and fancy free, so to speak, that's still a big jump. So tell us about that first experience, that first house, the Hiatus, as it was called, and everything that went into that first endeavor.
Yeah. So Kit, who's the friend that I'm speaking of, we grew up and have been best friends for years. And I think that's something that I was really missing in Los Angeles. I was missing a community. I had friends there, but they're so difficult to ever get to hang out with because everyone's so spread out. And just at that point in my life, that's what I was really missing was, a community. And one thing I loved about being from Bend is, I still have probably 20 friends that I've known since we were in elementary school or junior high. And so that community was really important. And so when I came back, just to be with Kid and part of his family and then start to see my other friends was really great. But what was even better than that is that, Kit was helping me to build this house. And that summer was one of my fondest summers. Before I was leaving LA, I was doing yoga and meditating and doing all this stuff, trying to kind of find what it was I was missing in my life. And I went back and every day I would work on that house, and you have to measure and you have to cut things. And, I had done some construction work when I was younger, but I hadn't done it for years. So it was this intense learning curve, but it was so enjoyable because I was learning so much so quickly. And when you are doing that type of work, you don't have time, your brain doesn't really have time to like drift off and, think existentially about your life and are you doing things right and where are you going and are you going to be okay? And, you're just working. And so, yeah, it was just an amazingly healing time just building that first house. So I really look back at that fondly.
So you actually had the hammer and nails and on that first construction project, you were doing it hands-on, huh?
Yeah. After that house, I started our company, Tongue and Groove is what it was originally called. And we built that house. And then we built a tiny tavern because Kit and I were roaming around after work one day going like, man, there should be a bar out here in this neighborhood where he lives. And the idea of the tiny tavern just happened. So we sold the first house, used the money to build the tiny tavern. That led to building 2 more mini pubs for one of our breweries here, 10 Barrel Brewing. And then we built another tiny house. That was over a couple years stretch where I was having to fill in work with handyman work and really difficult times. It was difficult to make that business model work because everything is a custom build and trying to go out and find the customers and, get to the point where you have something that they want to build. But building a community of these houses was always what I wanted to do, even from the beginning when they were on trailers. But the city code just wouldn't allow for that.
Mm-hmm. So is a tiny tavern on a trailer?
Yeah, it's on a trailer. The tiny tavern got bought by a food truck lot here in town. The name was changed to the Podski. And so he'd serve beers out of the tiny tavern. And then they did so well on that food lot, he was able to build an on foundation structure in the tiny tavern, went somewhere to the East Coast and is out to pasture at some wedding venue. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I miss it. It was cool to be able to go down and have a beer at the tiny tavern Podski at one point, but yeah.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. As an industry-leading, relationship-focused, design-build construction firm, Mosaic Construction has worked in many different asset classes from multifamily to retail, medical, industrial, and commercial. Mosaic Construction works to execute interior and exterior renovations with their team of trades and project managers. Their experience with value-add improvements has resulted in increased ROI and long-term value of the assets. They work nationally in partnership with local trades to deliver thoughtful, problem-solving construction management solutions to all their clients. For a personal, no-obligation consultation, call Ira Singer, 773-491-3145, or email Ira at mosaicconstruction.net. You can also find Ira on LinkedIn. Interesting. Well, tell us a little bit about you. I mean, you've gone from building the homes on a frame and you're actually building them on a foundation. And part of that was due to the construction codes and the inability to really expand that in the way that you wanted to. Well, talk to us a little bit about that transition and how you moved from building on a frame and actually going to the foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we finished the hiatus, the Bend Design Conference had just started. It's now happened a couple of years, but this was the first year, and we were invited to be part of the Bend Design Conference. So I wanted to park the house down by the library so that I could live in it, moving towards when we would show people the house. I wanted to show people how you actually live in these houses. I went to the assistant city manager at that time, and one other person from the city said, "Hey, I just want to live in this house on wheels, behind the library." You could see it we were at City Hall, and you can actually see the lot from where we were talking. And they said, "Oh, absolutely not. You can't do that. That's an RV, and you can store it there, but you can't live in it." And that was the beginning of me really having to dive into the understanding of city code and, the planning code as well as building code to try to make these things legit, because that was the problem really, is when they're on a trailer, most municipalities look at them as an RV. And when that happens, it's really difficult to get a mortgage. It's difficult to get a construction loan. It's difficult to get homeowners insurance. So I was pretty naive at that point. I was still showing people this rendering that had all these, 6 tiny houses all together on a trailer with a community garden in the middle of it, and was saying, "Look, this is what this can be." And then in 2015, the city adopted this code called the Cottage Code. And Bend actually, took a lot of what his design theory was and put it actually into the code. And for the first time, there was no minimum lot size and there was no minimum house size. We just had to put them on foundations. So yeah, that's what kind of led us down that path.
Well, tell us, what is a hiatus? It's a tiny home, but give us some detail in terms of what it actually is.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is we found a piece of land that was 3 acres that we could do tiny houses or our hiatus on a foundation. Since we were on a foundation, a couple of things happened that were nice about the design. Tiny houses on trailers are usually either 8 feet wide or 10 feet wide. That's the size of the trailer. And they can't be over around 13 and a half feet, 14 feet, because they have to be able to drive down the road. So we were able to design what we call the loft model, which you can go on the website and kind of take a look at. But, that thing is 14 by 28 feet, and that's the footprint. And then it has a lofted bedroom that's around 6 feet there. And then there's another loft over the bathroom. So you have this, this footprint that's only around 400 square feet, but you get about 600 square feet of living space. The one thing that I'm really proud about those houses, is the efficiency that they have. And the first thing you can do to make your house more efficient is just to make it smaller. You have so much less space that has to be conditioned by your heating source, your air conditioning, your lighting, you name it. By living in a smaller house, it's the first thing that you can do. Beyond that, the insulation is super important. So, we work with a company here in Bend called ECI and Energy Trust of Oregon, and they help us with the design to, do the things that we can do to make the house a greener and more efficient house. So I'm really proud that those first houses were really around 50% more efficient than a code-built house. If we had built the house to what the minimum building code was, those were 50% above that. So the last house there, we were also able to get solar on it. So it was a net zero house where the sun produced enough energy for the average use of energy in the house. So we've gone on to do another development now that all the houses are net zero ready. And I think we've really gotten really good at building a really high performance house.
Sounds like some really nice housing. Of course, when you hear the word 600 square feet of living space, that sounds really tiny to most people. And yet I think they're 2-bedroom homes, right? With 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. Is that correct?
We have 2 models. Loft model is the 600 square foot model that I described to you. That was in our first development. We had 22 cottages that we did there. They were all exactly the same. They had the same finishes. They had the same floor plan, all exactly the same. And what we were hearing from people, and when we sold out of those in just over a year, it was really unbelievable. We started our sale. Our first house was listed at $230,000. The last house that was actually resold recently by the original owner sold for $380,000. So, I mean, it's really, to me, that was proof of concept that people will and want to live in these smaller spaces. But we were hearing from people, hey, I have a family and a son or a daughter. And, if I just had an extra bedroom and another bathroom and I'd really love a garage, this would be amazing. People were saying, we really love the style that you're doing, but we could use some more space. I've never been attached to the trailer or a certain square footage as that being what things have to be considered a small house. The average house square footage in the U.S. is 2,500 square feet. So I think any reduction below
that's average.
Yeah.
Really? I had no idea it was that large. Wow.
Yeah. So, our 2-bedroom, 2-bath that we've built in our other development, Hiatus Roanoke, those are 900 square feet of conditioned livable space. We also have a garage that's about 300 square feet that is a finished garage, is drywall, tracked lighting, epoxy floor. We think of that as a flex space. If you don't want to park in the garage, you can park in your driveway and have an additional little spot. And then the third type of building that we build is a micro apartment. And these are basically the loft footprint, the 600 square foot footprint in an apartment form. And again, back to the building code, Bend is, I was just fortunate to land in my hometown and have a really progressive town when it comes to building code and building types. Since that struggle with the tiny houses on wheels to where we are now, there'll soon be 2 different kinds of cottage code. There's now a small unit development code, which means that you can build on a 1,500 square foot lot instead of a 4,000 square foot lot. We have these T courts that have just come through, and then the micro apartments. And the micro apartments to us are just like right along with the lines of thinking and the philosophy that we have, which is that people, need to reduce their size, their footprint. And by doing that, cost comes down. So this apartment is a 40-unit apartment, and each of the apartments is very similar in space and design as the 600 square foot hiatus that we started with. So that's our basic idea, is we just have those 3 housing types. And depending on the property that we find, we see what we think will work and then develop from there.
So are the micro apartments, are those 1-bedroom apartments, or are they?
They're a studio. Yeah, they're basically a studio because they're that same 600 square foot house with a lofted bedroom and stairs that go up to the loft with a really high ceiling in the front. Yeah.
Okay. And is that's in progress now, or have you completed?
Yeah, no, it's in progress right now. It's at the city for the entitlements. The entitlements package is there. So we have the rough design done, and we'll be waiting for a land use decision. Once the land use decision happens, then we do our construction documents, and then we think we'll start breaking ground on that in 8 months to 12 months.
Okay.
But the land has been purchased. That's actually part of our construction fund. That's one of the projects that's in the fund.
Interesting. And the micro apartments are also solar, is that correct?
We will have a solar array. It's yet to be seen if we'll have enough roof space to be able to have the solar make the building a completely net zero building where there's no energy being drawn from the grid. But we haven't actually done those studies yet, so I'm not sure. But we will have some solar on the micro apartment.
Okay, well, interesting. It just sounds so avant-garde, and it just sounds like so the way that we really need to be going in terms of our building and building codes here for so many reasons. So future plans, you're going to continue doing the individual unit developments, and I guess you're going to, after you have the 40-unit apartment complex in place, you'll have a better feel in terms of whether that is also a direction you want to take the company. But it sounds very hopeful there. 600 feet, is not really, that is a really good size studio apartment, not at all unusual really for studio type apartments. In fact, it's larger than a lot of studios. Have you given thought to doing 2-bedroom apartment complexes?
We haven't really given thought to that. What we've done is really just taken the footprint that we have felt worked really well in the loft model. People have been living in those homes now for a long time and everyone's happy. I lived in it for a little bit just to get the feel for the space, and the space works really well. And you're right, our apartments are on the larger side as far as a studio goes. I don't think Bend is ready for the type of micro apartment housing that you'll see in like Seattle or New York. The code does allow for a minimum of a 250 square foot apartment. So you could greatly reduce that in our code and make a smaller house. I don't think that's necessary yet. I think that the size that we have is a really comfortable size for someone to live in. If we keep seeing more and more of a housing problem, you might find that in order to reduce the rents even further, because housing has skyrocketed, we might have to look at actually going smaller, not larger, and maybe get down to the 250 or 300 square foot micro apartment.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Would you ever invest all your money in a single stock? Very unlikely. Yet investors are willing to risk $50,000 to $100,000 in a single property in real estate all the time. Avestor is the world's first customizable real estate investment platform. Investors can build their own custom portfolio selecting investments across multiple asset classes such as single-family homes, multifamily, student housing, self-storage, and shopping centers. You can also invest across multiple markets and different time frames. Avestor also enables other real estate entrepreneurs and syndicators to build and use Avestor's infrastructure and cloud platform to create their own customizable real estate funds. To learn more, visit us at avestorinc.com. Avestor, real estate investing made simple.
Well, so not only are you providing housing for people, but you also are providing investment opportunities for private investors who want to invest in equity. So tell us about the Hiatus Capital Fund and how people can find their way to that.
Well, first of all, hiatushomes.com/fund will take you to that part of the website, and then you can sign up. You'll get our fund book, which describes exactly how the fund works. And then we're doing webinars too. We do about 2 webinars a month where Ryan, my partner, who's the financial side of things, and I get on and we describe, the company in detail. We describe how the fund functions. But the basics of it are this. When I started the first development, there was no way for me to get a loan at all. So I had to raise equity to basically finish the lots. But once the lots were done, I was able to get a traditional construction loan to finish the house. So that's how we financed that one. It took me almost a year to raise the money that we needed to do that. It was super time consuming. I was really, still trying to manage building the development as I was fundraising. And Ryan was working for a construction fund at the time. And they basically said, the runner of the fund, Chris, said, look, I can't finance this for you because we don't do dirt. We don't loan on dirt, but I've got 2 guys that are super smart that can help you figure out how to finance it. And that's when I met Ryan for the first time on that very first development. I'd buy him and his partner, Jeff, lunch. And we would, once a week, once every 2 weeks, we would just crunch the numbers. And at the end of that, he said, I know how you can do this. You just have to raise $1 million in equity. So again, that was really difficult. I come from a single mom who was a bartender. I've never really had a lot of money connections. I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but it was just calling people. When I met people, I'd call them and I'd say, hey, this is what we're doing. And we offered a really large return on that. One, I was unproven at that time. The housing concept was unproven at that time. It was the first use of that new code. And, some people were going, no way are people going to live in a 600 square foot house and buy it. That's just not going to happen. But people were wrong. We ended up returning those investors on average a 20+% IRR on their investment. And so when we started the next development, same thing happened. I had to raise money to do the dirt. And again, it was just such a huge amount of time. And at that time, people were coming out of the woodwork saying they wanted to be part of this. They wanted to do a new development. Like all this stuff was happening. And, we had stayed in touch over the whole thing. I said, look, man, I think a really efficient way for us to do this and try to scale this type of housing would be to have a construction fund. So at that time, I was returning investment to the Hiatus investors, and we started the fund with the idea that hopefully some of those guys would come in. 80% of them came in, and our fund was at $1 million in a matter of a month or something. So that was great. And now we've continued to fundraise. We're at about 1.5 million. Over the next 3 quarters, we have availability for people to come into the fund. You have to be an accredited investor, and we can describe that. But the best thing for someone to do is sign up for that webinar and then watch it. And if you're interested, you can talk face to face with us. We can set up calls afterwards to talk with people too. But basically the way it works is if you're part of this fund and you buy in, there's a minimum $50,000 investment. You buy into it. The fund owns all of our properties, the projects that are inside the fund. So you can go to Dial, which is a county website that shows ownership, and you can see that okay, the Hiatus Capital Fund owns this property. So you can, for people that are investing that aren't here in Bend, it's just I think a good way for them to know that their investment dollars are there, and you own part of that property. So, the idea too for us, aside from just efficiency and fundraising, the other part of that was for risk. One of the riskiest parts of development is when you just have the land and it hasn't been improved at all. So since these are equity investments, if we buy a piece of land and the market dips a bit, we don't have to all freak out and sell the land. We can hold the land. We're not burning any equity at all. And we can choose to sell the land. It just gives us a lot more options, and also doesn't get us into a situation where we have to sell some land because we have debt on it. So the idea is the fund purchases the land, mostly pays for the improvement to the lots. And then once we have a lot creation, we just take a traditional construction loan and then build the house. And then once all the houses are sold, the profit comes back in. It's split 50-50 among the fund holders and then comes back into our company. And then the principal for people can stay in and we can continue to use that money for other projects, or people can pull their principal out. And that's the basics of it. And I think it's a great investment. One, because we've proven that this is just the tip of the iceberg for the type of housing that we're doing. And two, because housing inventory is at an all-time low nationally. It's even more of a problem here in Bend where people want to live. I feel like we'll be doing really good for the next 5-10 years. I don't know. But who knows? I can't predict what the future holds, and it's definitely a risk and all that. But yeah, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, you never can predict the future, but it sounds like a very solid plan. So the construction actually is debt, and the equity is really in the property. So yeah, that should be a fairly safe investment, I would think. Land properties do fluctuate, but it's not quite the same as other real estate ventures there. And if you can just hold on to them, that land always comes back. So,
yeah, right. Yeah.
Interesting concept there. So viewers and listeners, that is hiatushomes.com/fund. And Hiatus is HIATUSHOMES.com/fund.
And you can just go to hiatushomes.com as well, and that'll show you all our developments, and you can see photos of stuff and read a little bit more about us. And yeah, I'd love to have some people come to one of our webinars, and even just for informational purposes. I think it's cool. I love to learn new things. That's one of my favorite things in life to do is learn. So even if you think you might not be interested, it's pretty cool to learn what we're doing and how we're structuring this fund. I think it's really cool. So please come.
Absolutely. Yes, I have been to their site. Lots of eye candy. The homes are just fantastically beautiful, and you'll enjoy your time on their website there. So take some time to do that. And like Jesse said, it's informative, but it's also a cool site to visit. I'd like to actually see the home someday.
Yeah, come out and visit us.
It's a beautiful community, it looks like. Because it's not just the homes that are beautiful. The whole community was designed with aesthetics in mind, and it's not just a row of tiny houses set side by side. It's the whole thing was arranged extraordinarily aesthetically. So beautiful community there. Well, Jesse, share with us one of your most difficult setbacks, and how did you come through that time, and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, man, there's been a lot of setbacks, definitely. I think for me, the two biggest setbacks or hurdles. One was the financing part of things and the business part of stuff. I didn't have experience with financing. I didn't have experience really with business. I had a lot of experience running projects and, running crews and that sort of thing, and even budgets. But the finance part of this whole thing it took me a long time to really understand it. And now it's one of my favorite parts of the job is really analyzing our numbers and, deciding, making decisions based on, our past performances and materials and what they cost. And that to me has just been a really fun thing to learn, but it was really hard, and having Ryan has been, really incredible. I learn a lot from him, and he's a financial real estate wizard as far as I'm concerned. And to have him as a partner now, as we move into the future has been really great. But yeah, the financing and learning all that was a real challenge. And then I would say the building code, the idea that there's this code that prevents people from living in a house on wheels couldn't imagine that was a thing, and so I had to learn a lot there, and it was definitely a setback. But I oftentimes think back, if there wasn't that building code, what might have happened if we were building tiny houses on wheels. And, I don't think I would have gone into the experience of making a huge development and continue to do that. And I really enjoy the development part of it. And as you said, the community part of it, seeing the houses finished and seeing the people start to interact with each other, that's been a really positive thing that's come out of it. But really hard. You have to put the work in. I mean, it's just one of those things. I think probably a lot of entrepreneur type people on your podcast here. And, there was so much doubt. I mean, over this whole process, especially in the beginning, so much doubt, just every day kind of having to wake up and go, I don't want to build the house today. And is this house even coming out okay? And I mean, just the constant, self-talk that happens to you. You have to figure out a way to get through that. You just have to figure out a way to say, okay, maybe I'm right about myself and I'm going to fail, but I'm in it now, and I have to move forward. And I think what you'll find is there's this crazy kind of graph that is the difficulty you're dealing with is here. And the more you move forward, you move, things get easier, and you keep doing that. And then there's a snowball effect. There's a tipping point where all of a sudden, people are coming out of the woodwork to help you. They like what you're doing. And that process has just been so gratifying. I've met so many great people, and, from the people that work on the houses to the people that have invested, I can honestly say that I really have enjoyed everybody as a human. And I hope we can continue to do that, as we move forward. It's really important to me. So
Enlightened investors will be right back after this important announcement. I have a big ask that will only take a moment of your time. Ratings and reviews are the lifeblood of our podcast. So to leave a review, iPhone or other Apple iOS device users, go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes. For all you non-Apple device users, go to podchasers.com. On either platform, search for Real Estate Investing Abundance. Once found, please leave a review and a rating. Subscriptions are also vital to our show's success, so please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. It is free to subscribe, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Yeah, interesting. How often we find ourselves in those situations, and how easy it is to get discouraged and to listen to that self-doubt and that self-talk. That prevents, I think, a lot of good things in life. It's difficult to get through those times. Well, how are you putting your success as an investor and entrepreneur to work to help create universal well-being and abundance for all beings?
I think it's really a housing thing. I still believe in it. I really, really believe in the part of the environment. I think that our housing is creating a lot of problems with our environment. And I think we're trying to produce something that is going to help with that. That's really part of it. And then the community part of it. I think that, you see how many mass shootings we're having in the US today, and you see a lot of depression. And I think a lot of this stuff comes from a fractured community, people living in a city where they live in a high rise, they never meet their neighbor. They come home and they go up to their high rise, they sit there. Or even in our community, housing has been designed. So you come down, it's in a city, it's been designed so that you can move cars quickly through it, not for the happiness of people. There's a really, really good book called Happy City that describes what's kind of happened with the way we've built our cities and how we should build our cities around people's happiness. So, you drive down the street, you come into your garage, you go in your backyard, you don't see your neighbor. If you look at the original, the Hiatus Benham project, those houses are actually, the front doors are faced into the common areas, not to the street. So you have a back door to get into your house, you walk through your house, you get to your porch, and your porch is looking out onto a common area and you can see your neighbors. It's designed so when you come out and you walk to the community garden or to the pond, you're going to bump into your neighbor. I think that type of community has been lost a bit. And I think trying to design our housing so that it facilitates connection is really important. And we're trying to do it kind of one development and one house at a time.
Well, excellent. One question I wanted to ask you while we were still on the business end of this is the cost of construction has escalated enormously this last year.
Yeah.
And you're in the middle of construction. How are you dealing with those costs?
That's a great question. What we usually do is we pre-sell the homes. So for instance, we'll build a model home so people can see it. As we build, we'll start the second house. It'll be maybe the foundation is there. We're doing the framing, but we'll pre-sell that house to someone so that they've bought the house. And when the house is finished, we immediately sell the house to them. And we've done that way since I've started the business. In Bend, though, two things are happening. One is house prices are skyrocketing. Over the last year, the median house price has gone up $100,000. I think it's gone up even more since then. So we're seeing prices go up, but we're also seeing our lumber costs go up. We're seeing our materials, our appliances, everything seems to be escalating. So we've finished the top 5 houses, and those have been either closed or in contract. And we started the bottom 5 houses. This is in our Hiatus Roanoke development. We've decided to not pre-sell the house until we're at least at the drywall stage. That's for 2 reasons. One, we'll know our costs, right? We'll know what it really costs us to build that house. And 2, it's just a buying frenzy right now in Bend. And it makes the most sense to, get to that end, that the house being finished for people to then buy them. So, so that's what we've done. And I don't think we're going to see, I don't know if we'll see costs come down, but at least in the housing sector, there's such a need for housing that I think hopefully those graphs run parallel to each other.
Yeah, all the predictions I've seen, and they, even though they're predicting that a recession has to happen here, they're not predicting a 2008 kind of crash where the real estate market falls out from under us. Because in 2008, building had exceeded demand considerably, and we just haven't seen that happen at this point in time. So hopefully that will turn out to be true. But yeah, I could see how the way things escalated this last year, that pre-selling homes could be really put you in the hole pretty quickly there. So smart move to not do that there. Well, for my last question here, Jesse, imagine that you have come to the end of your life, and as you lay on your deathbed, what will you look back on with your greatest sense of satisfaction and fulfillment?
Oh, I think, having a couple daughters, I mean, that's the obvious answer. And it really is true. We have a 4-year-old and a 14-year-old, and you can be doing great at work and feel like you're doing an awesome job. And you come home and it's just a whole nother skill set and challenge. And it has the days, and everyone I think says this too, but like it has those days where you just can't believe how wonderful the kids are. And then you have these days where you just can't believe how difficult they are. So I think if I'm able to get to into my life and my kids still love me and want me around, I think that'll be a huge accomplishment. So I work, I've tried to really look at, now that I have a lot more support and a team around me, I'm able to have a lot more freedom and do these types of things and not just be on the job site constantly. But I'm really trying to balance more of a work-life balance and being able to take part with the kids and make sure that on Fridays, maybe I take a half day off and, we go do our thing. So I'm really trying to know that is one of the most important things as well. And so that needs to be a priority. So I've been trying to do that and hope that at the end of my life, my kids, I hope most people are bummed out that I die. I think that's a real test, right? If everybody comes to your funeral and misses you, must have done something right in life.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, it has been a pleasure.
Yeah, it really has.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity. And please, any viewers, reach out. I'd love to make contact with you guys. And just thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.